what are three things that you would tell somebody as far as empowering themselves in their career?
Know what you want, know what you need, and be flexible.
Welcome to African Women on the Move, the program that shares stories, ideas, and tips on becoming a more empowered woman. My name is Ivy Prosper. We also get to meet some interesting ladies who are doing some fascinating things in their communities as well as around the world. Today my guest is Ekua Brew-Hammond, a woman I was instantly fascinated by because of her sense of style. We actually met at Ghana Fashion and Design Week back in 2012. And she's been featured in many style blogs for her sense of style. She's actually an accomplished writer with work that has been featured in Ebony Magazine, Madame Noir, Trace Magazine, and many, many more. She also has a critically acclaimed novel called Powder Necklace. She's actually just finished her second book, and I got a chance to chat with her. She's got a very busy schedule, so I was glad to be able to get her for a few moments while visiting Accra. So Nana, we met a few years ago, and I was completely enamored by your sense of style. I have to say that.
Thank you.
And then in talking to you, you're just such an intellectual woman. Your book Powder Necklace very much inspired by your life, from what I understand. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I was 12, I grew up in New York, and when I was 12, my parents sent me from Queens, where we lived, to go to school in Ghana, and I was here for 3 years. And so the book Powder Necklace is inspired by that experience. A 12-year-old girl. The girl in the book is from Britain, just because I have a lot more family that was living in London at the time, and I spent a lot of time when I was living in Ghana going back and forth between London. So, fictionalized it a bit, but definitely inspired by my story.
I'm curious to know, what made your parents send you to Ghana after living in the US for 12 years of your life? It must have been a shock for you.
Oh yeah, it was a huge shock. But I think that what I found after doing a lot of research, just after the fact, I found that a large percentage of Ghanaians send their children home. I mean, I knew that through, that was always the threat looming over us, hey, if you're bad, we'll send you to Ghana.
My parents did the same thing. They would always threaten us all the time.
Yeah.
If you don't do this, you're going to Ghana, you're going to Ghana.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think a lot of people did it, and then, I did some research after the fact and found that a large percentage of Ghanaian parents do that because they didn't want their children raised with, sort of abrochi values, you know what I'm saying? So, my parents did that for basically that reason.
It was mostly my mom who wanted us to go back, but my dad was a little bit okay, but then he was mostly no, they're gonna stay right here. So she did a lot to try to make sure that we had Ghanaian values instilled in us, and she was always about, you're Ghanaian, so remember this, you're black, so remember this. So we had that added layer of being black and then being an African from Ghana. So it's quite interesting. When you came, what was the defining moments that you found while you were here in school with students who were from here? You were essentially like a foreigner, even though you're not, but you were. What was the defining moment that made you feel like either this isn't for me or I'm gonna fit in?
I never felt like I'm gonna fit in. I went through several. There were levels to the whole experience. So I didn't actually know at the beginning of the trip that I was going to be staying. So there was that level of sort of being kind of tricked into the situation. But I would say probably there were a couple of defining moments. So when I came to Ghana, my grandmother is very, very Christian. So there was the whole kind of experience of going to church. And also when you first come to Ghana, if you've never experienced before every single signboard, but every 5 steps there's a church, a sign. On the taxi cabs, it's Yesu Nipa, something about Jesus, something about God. It was very sort of jarring for someone like me who came from New York. I mean, yes, we went to church, but it wasn't like that. So that was probably one of the biggest kind of experiences, initially. Having my grandmother, we had morning devotion, and we went to church every Sunday, and church was a big affair. You know, it was such a big part of our lives here. So that was like a big sort of change for me being here. But then I will never forget the day when my grandmother dropped me off at school. I went to Infantiman Girls School in Salt Pond. So, you know, we made the drive 2 hours at the time because our driver drove too fast.
Like they always do.
Yeah, well, but it was 2 hours, you know, from, you know, our house in Accra to this, you know, to this place, Infantiman. And it was at night. And I remember, like, going into the dorm room and no one was there because everyone was at chapel. And, like, you know, unpacking and doing all that stuff and then being like, wow, I'm going to be alone here. Like, she's leaving. That was so scary.
I bet it was.
That was terrifying. And I remember, like, you know, I remember it so dramatically because it was night and there were like new gravels on the ground, but they were like twinkling like diamonds. And I remember like the pickup truck like retreating into the distance and the moon. It was so dramatic in my mind. And then, like, you know, they dropped me off at chapel. So I enter the room and everyone, of course, is assembled already. I'm in mid-service. Everyone like swings around and looks at me, and I sit in the back and there's like a broken chair. Like, it was just all so dramatic. And then I get back to the dorm and then I'm realizing, like, wow, I have to change in front of everyone. It was just like that was like a big kind of like scary, terrifying moment. Okay.
I bet.
Yeah.
Now, the way you describe your experience, it's so clear that you're a writer. It's so clear because you're so vivid. Like, I was actually imagining the twinkling of the rocks while you're driving, and just how did you know that you were a good writer, and when did you realize you loved writing?
I have always loved writing. Even before, I was 12 when I came to Ghana, but even before then, I would always write little short stories. I was always reading way above my reading level. Like, I remember reading like romance novels at like 11 or 10 and being like, I was the girl like in school, like everyone else is playing during recess and I'd be like in the schoolyard like reading like Sidney Sheldon. Like, it was so, and so I was always kind of like interested, and then I would be interested in kind of like writing stories about whatever. So when I came to Ghana, I think for me, being in that experience, I knew then that I was going to write about it. And I remember writing this letter to my parents while I was in school, and someone found the letter, and I had like written all these terrible things about how awful this place was. Someone found it and they like all descended upon me.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was so scary. Like, they were like, you know, I'd come back from scripture union clutching my Bible, and then like all the dorm mates had like ambushed me at the door, and they were like, our bathhouse is filthy, huh? This and this and this. And I was just like, ugh. And you know, and that was like another moment where I was like, this is crazy, terrible, and I'm definitely gonna write about this.
I'm sure it has defined who you are today. What are some of the things that you think helped to shape you into the woman that you are?
I mean, so many things. I mean, I think at that age, because I had come from a pretty kind of routine sort of experience in New York, and so to come to Ghana and see that the world is so much bigger than, like, you know, your little block, your little life was jarring. Like, to see like the class differences in Ghana, you know, a mansion, but then like the dirt road, like all the dichotomies. I remember thinking like, this is wild. And then going to school and having that experience and being away from home and actually having to be your own person within that space and learning to survive at that young of an age. I think that it really made me a strong person, but at the same time, I think it also made me almost too stoic because now I feel like I can be anywhere and I'm like gas face, steel face. Like, it took me a lot to be able to just kind of express myself and say like, and show some vulnerability because I had to be so tough.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for someone who has roots somewhere else and roots here? So, for example, myself, I was born in Ghana, but we left when I was 2 years old. and I lived in Canada for so many years and then came back to Ghana. So it's kind of like, you don't know, you're like, where do I fit? Where do I fit? How do you feel with your experiences as far as, do you identify more as Ghanaian or more as an American?
I think that I identify as Ghanaian American. And I mean, I think there were times when, like when I first came as a 12-year-old girl, I was like, I'm American. I really needed to hold on to that identity. And then there was a time when I was like, I'm Ghanaian, and I needed people to know that, hey, I understand a little bit of trio and all of this. But now I'm just like, listen, I am a hybrid. There are lots of things that growing up in New York has made me, and there are lots of things that my experiences in Ghana and having, come to Ghana. I've been in Ghana. I come to Ghana every year, for the last 17 years I've been here, plus school. So I've seen Ghana, evolve. I was here in 1992 when Rawlings became President Rawlings from the dictatorship. So I've seen that all the way through, and I was here so I came here in 1990. So I've seen Ghana grow. I've also grown. I think that I would say to anybody who is in the diaspora and trying to like sort of grapple with what their identity is that you define who you are. No one can tell you. Now I don't stand for someone saying to me, hey, you're not Ghanaian, but are you? I am. This is the Ghanaian story. Is not just, oh, I was born and raised here and whatever. There's so many permutations of the Ghanaian experience. I've been doing research on another book, and I stumbled upon a statistic that said between 1966 and I believe 1972, close to 3 million Ghanaians left Ghana. So I mean, you can't tell me that they stopped being Ghanaian just because they left. And yeah, they had kids. So I mean, that's what it is. And I find it interesting now, too, because a lot of the girls that I went to Infantsman with have moved abroad.
Oh, really?
And I think to myself, how ironic, because I'm sure a lot of them have kids. And I wonder if they feel that their kids are any different. Right. I mean, I'm sure they do in certain ways, but for them, those are their children. So, and if they were to come to an Infantsman type of experience, you know what I mean? So this world is big, and, we're all sort of moving around for different reasons. And everything in life is sort of a mix. The clothes that we wear come from something, but they're inspired by something else. The food that we eat, we're living in this huge kind of melange of influences and experiences, and it's okay. We don't have to be so sort of tribalistic or nationalistic. We can mix, we can blend.
Now, you mentioned that you're doing research on another book. I've heard that you finished that book, actually.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about it, even though it hasn't been released yet?
I know. So I've written a second book. It is done, and it's basically set in Ghana, 1962 to 99. And what it's basically about is it's about the complicated relationship between a house girl and her madame. And it's sort of how their relationship evolves over all those years as Ghana is evolving. And I really wanted to kind of, it started out by exploring this idea of, my parents left Ghana in the 70s, and there was a wave of people, as I mentioned to you, that left Ghana in the 60s and 70s. So I kind of wanted to really understand what that was, because it's hard to leave the country of your birth to go to another place. What were the conditions? Why? And then, sort of tangentially, when I was living in Ghana, one of the things that struck me, as I mentioned earlier, was the class differential. And seeing like young girls and young boys as house girls and house boys, and that was something I was definitely not used to living in the States. So I kind of wanted to know, like, okay, what makes a house girl a house girl? What are the conditions that send you there? And this parallel idea of like leaving the place that you're from, and going to this foreign experience, and how do you survive? So that's what the book is about.
As a writer who is kind of straddling between two worlds, do you think being a woman has added to your advantage, or do you think it has hindered your capabilities of moving forward?
I don't think, I'm sure there are sort of things that are happening beyond my knowledge that, you can only sort of speak to your experience and you don't know what's happening. I think that maybe on a personal level, there are concerns that I have, or other goals that I have, and I'm always mindful of, okay, well, I want to have a family. How does that sort of factor into the way that I pursue my career, or how I set things up for myself? So there's like the personal side of that. In terms of professionally, I don't feel that. I don't feel that I have had any hindrances, but I think that maybe the main the main sort of differential, I would say, is kind of being, as an African person, I think that it's difficult to get work published in the States unless it has a certain unless it's on a certain subject matter, just because for, you know, maybe the editor or the person that's sort of in the decision-making seat may not get it, may not get the intricacies of the subject matter, or even something, or if they do, it literally isn't as valuable, you know, in the sense of what they will offer you as an advance. So there's that issue. I mean, for example, if you have, you know, an American person writing an American story about a family living in the suburbs, which is also, you know, it could be the same exact kind of dynamic, but if you put that in an African context, that writer of that other story may get a higher advance because they're anticipating a bigger market for it. And I find that just in general, like the market, the way it's set up, isn't really set up for success for writers who aren't writing the kinds of material that appeals to the mainstream American market. I always think about, you know, the fact that if Black authors abroad were heavily promoted in Africa or in the Caribbean, or considering that, you know, there are francophone countries and lusophone countries and all these other countries due to colonization, even if you had African American writers whose works were translated into Portuguese or French or what have you, you'd have an immediate market. And maybe that's something that, you know, publishers need to be doing and thinking about. But I think that, you know, they don't do that. And they kind of have the same playbook for everyone, and they're not thinking about the fact that, well, you know, the market, a lot of readers you're marketing very heavily to a certain type of audience, and they may not get it.
What advice would you give to a young girl who wants to be an author, who wants to publish her work? What are the steps she needs to take to get to where she needs to be? And it doesn't even have to be just a young girl, because I believe it's never too late to start something new. So it could be a woman in her 30s, 40s, 50s who decides, I want to write. What advice would you give for the steps they should take to get there?
The practical steps to getting published is, one, obviously finish. If you're doing creative, if you're doing fiction, you have to have the manuscript finished, and then you have to find an agent, and then you have that agent will then present the finished manuscript to different editors for publication. So that's like the practical thing that you need to do. If it's nonfiction, if you have the first 3 chapters, I believe, and a full outline of the book, and an agent, they will send it off to the editors, and hopefully you get a book deal, you know, based on the quality of the work that you're doing. But I think that as far as like just sort of general as a writer, with writing, there's so much rejection involved, and I think that what my advice is basically, you really need to be clear about what it is you want to say, and really be firm in your voice. But it's important that when all is said and done, like, to remember that you are the creator and you are the one who has the final say over what this book should be, and hold out for a partner being an agent, that being an editor and a publisher that really gets what you're trying to do and isn't trying to change it too much, so that you can maintain your voice and your integrity as an author.
What are your thoughts on self-publishing? Because it's become so popular now. People will use sites like Amazon or Lulu to publish their own work. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that it's a business decision. I think that when you publish with a house, you get some support in the sense that you're going to get an advance, you're going to get some marketing, but the reality too is that unless you're a really big name author or you have a powerful agent that can really sort of negotiate for you, you're going to get the advance all right, and you're going to get some marketing dollars put behind you, but it's not going to be that much. At the publishers, they kind of know the books that they're going to put everything behind, and the rest of you, if it does great, oh great, and if it doesn't, well, it's a write-off for the company. So I think that it's a business decision. If you have the money to put up front to pay for the printing of the book and to get it into the bookstores and to do all of that stuff, then I'd say go for it. But again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, because most of the prizes, for example, the literary prizes for fiction only are available to people who have been published in the traditional way. So say, for example, it costs you about $20,000 to self-publish your book and do all the marketing and what have you. You wouldn't be eligible for the prizes that you might win the $20,000 that pays you back. You may sell enough to make your money back, but it's difficult to do that. Whereas if you have a traditional publisher, you've gotten your advance. If the book flops, well, on a financial level anyway, you have your money, support, and you have that support.
So, as I had said before, I was always fascinated by your fashion, your sense of fashion. I've seen you in Essence magazine and different style blogs where they show you for your street style. How did you evolve your personal style? Is it something you've always been interested in, or is it something that just kind of came to you as you got older?
I think I was always kind of interested in experimenting with clothing and fashion. I remember one Christmas when I was a kid, my mom got me this sweater with matching leg warmers, and I would wear it around the house, and I loved it. And so I've always been sort of into like expressing myself in fashion. I think when I came to Ghana, there was another layer and level added to it, because that was the first time that I went to a seamstress or a tailor, and they took my measurements and made clothes for me, and I was like, wow, this is cool, because you never, you go in the States, you just pick something off of a rack and buy it. So that relationship kind of opened a whole new sort of understanding of fashion in my mind. And just living in Ghana, living in Ghana and then coming back and forth and making things, since I was 12 years old, I really have begun to understand how certain fabrics drape and what's going to work on my body. And so that's one side of things, the creation aspect of it. And I think also too, growing up in the States, there was so much negativity about being an African or being dark-skinned or what have you. But in fashion, it was like the darkest person was the most beautiful person. And so I really gravitated towards that, even though there was a lot of exoticism involved in that as well. And it was just sort of like, we'll take this rare exotic creature and they're so beautiful, but it gave me a lot of confidence. And I remember Ekua, the model, when she first came out, one of my friends was working as an intern at a fashion showroom. And I went to one of the shows that she was in. It was like one of her first shows. And I remember like people gasping when she walked out. Like, oh, someone can be this dark and so beautiful. Like, it was just so... But it was amazing to see that, like to see, these dark-skinned models being lauded for their beauty. It was really affirming to me. And so I will always appreciate and love fashion for that.
And as I said, we had met at Ghana Fashion and Design Week initially. What are your thoughts on the fashion industry in Africa? Because the continent has different fashion weeks. South Africa has one, Dakar has one, Senegal, Ghana, Nigeria. What are your thoughts on the growth of the industry?
It's to me, I think that we really need, the continent really needs to be recognized for the level of talent, the mastery, the artistry that is happening here. I mean, it's so almost commonplace that we take it for granted, but I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the tailors and the seamstresses are like so incredibly talented, and it's almost like they're taken for granted. So I like the fact that there's more recognition and more celebration of that in the form of these formal programs. What I would love to see is actually more engagement between sort of like the fashion design elite and the tailors and the seamstresses and the weavers and these.
Yeah, the weavers.
I mean, they're people who are like weaving one of a kind fabrics, and you can just tell them, and they can churn out like 30 of those, and like, when do you need them by? Like tomorrow? Okay. And I wish that there was more government support of people, of these talented people. I wish that, to me, my vision for Africa is we would be sort of like, the way you talk of Italy, for like their leather, and France for their lace. I feel like the continent, textiles is one of the biggest things. You have so many people who are copying what we're doing.
Yeah.
So to me, I think that there should be way more resources, government-wise, being invested in the people who are doing this work, and really working to partner with other countries to create a formal market for it, so that you have these skilled people who are passing these trades down to their children and really building an empire for themselves. But also, it's a tourism thing for the country. It's a calling card for the country.
Most definitely. I hope that I see empires building in this country and in other countries as well.
Absolutely.
Fashion empires, like how you see Gucci and Chanel, and just, I hope that we see that in the continent of Africa.
And I think we will. I think we're starting to see lots of, younger people who are just designing for themselves. Christy Brown, I mean, what she's doing, she's building, a fashion house for herself. And I love her story that, her grandmother was a seamstress. So, I mean, she's definitely sort of like the new generation, an extension of what, her grandmother was doing. And there are a lot of other people. There's Mona, and Mosaic, the Dabanka sisters who have their shoe line.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there are people, all over the continent that are starting companies and houses. So
Yeah. I'm sure we'll see big, amazing things in the next 5 to 10 years.
yeah, I think so.
most
I think
definitely,
so.
most definitely.
Yeah.
How would you define yourself if you were to give 5 words to define Nana Brew-Hammond?
I think I'm very driven. I'm very disciplined. I'm very creative. I really like to move, do things when I'm moved to do them and inspired to do them, rather than just doing something for the sake of doing it. I'm very thorough and a perfectionist. And I'm also just, I'm growing. I'm under construction, I'm just still figuring things out. But I feel more and more sort of definitive as I kind of grow up and feel like really confident in, who I am and what I'm about.
You're already there, but you're still on your way. And I think you're an amazing woman.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for giving me your time today. You are definitely an African woman on the move, in my opinion. You're moving and you're shaking and you're making an influence. You're shaping the minds of people of the future. Young people look up to people like you, and I appreciate you giving the time to talk to me today.
Thank you very much, and I feel the same way about you.
Oh, thank you.